Hello, welcome back to my channel, Monique Josephine. I am going to review chapter 7 now of Hillbilly Elegy. This one is going to be a little bit sad. I think this is one of the first losses he's going to experience. So let's just jump right in. In the fall, after I turned 13, Mom began dating Matt, a younger guy who worked as a firefighter. I adored Matt. From the start, he was my favorite of all Mom's men, and we still keep in touch. One night, I was home watching TV, waiting for Mom to get home from work with a bucket of KFC chicken for dinner. I had two responsibilities that evening. First, track down Lindsay in case she was hungry, and second, run food over to Mama as soon as Mom arrived. Shortly before I expected Mom, Mama called. "Where's your mother?" "I don't know. What's wrong, Mama?" Her response, more than anything I've ever heard, is seared in my memory. She was worried, scared even. The hillbilly accent that she hid dripped from her lips. "No one has seen or heard from Pawpaw." I told her I'd call as soon as Mom got home, which I expected would happen soon. I figured Mama was overreacting, but then I considered the utter predictability of Papa's schedule. He woke up at 6 in the morning every day without an alarm clock. Then he drove to McDonald's at 7 to grab coffee with his old Armco buddies. After a couple of hours of conversation, he would amble over to Mama's house and spend the morning watching TV or playing cards. If he left at all before dinner time, he might briefly visit his friend Paul's hardware store. Without exception, he stayed at Mama's house to greet me when I came home from school. And if I didn't go to Mama's, if I went to Mom's, as I did when times were good, he'd usually come over and say goodbye before he went home for the evening. That he had missed all of these events meant something was very wrong. Mom walked in the door a few minutes after Mama called, and I was already sobbing. "Papa, Papa, I think he's dead." The rest is a blur. I think I relayed Mama's message. We picked her up down the street and sped over to Papa's house, no more than a few minutes' drive away. Excuse me. I knocked on his door violently. Mom ran to the back door, screamed, and came around front, both to tell Mama that he was hunched over in his chair and to grab a rock. She then broke and went in through a window, unlocked and opened the door, and tended to her father. By then, he had been dead for nearly a day. Mom and Mama sobbed uncontrollably as we waited for an ambulance. I tried to hug Mama, but she was beside herself and unresponsive even to me. When she stopped crying, she clutched me in her chest and told me to go say goodbye before they took his body away. I tried, but the medical technician kneeling beside him gazed at me as if she thought I was creepy for wanting to take a look at a dead body. I didn't tell her the real reason I had walked back to my slouching Papa. After the ambulance took Papa's body away, we drove immediately to Aunt Wee's house. I guess Mom had called her because she descended from her porch with tears in her eyes. We all hugged her before squeezing into the car and heading back to Mama's. The adults gave me the inevitable task of tracking down Lindsay and giving her the news. Sorry, I'm super close. This was before cell phones, and Lindsay, being a 17-year-old, was difficult to reach. She wasn't answering the house phone, and none of her friends answered my calls. Mama's house sat literally 5 houses away from Mom's. 313 McKinley to 303. So I listened to the adults make plans, watched out the window for signs of my sister's return. The adults spoke about funeral arrangements, where Papa would want to be buried, in Jackson, goddammit, Mama insisted, and who would call Uncle Jimmy to tell him to come home. Lindsay returned home shortly before midnight. I trudged down the street and opened our door. She was walking down the stairs, but stopped cold when she saw my face, red and blotchy from crying all day. "Papa," I blurted out. "He's dead." Lindsay collapsed on the stairs. I ran up and embraced her. We sat there for a few minutes crying, as two children do when they find out the most important man in their lives has died. Lindsay said something then, and though I don't remember the exact phrase, I do remember that Papa had just done some work on her car, and she was muttering something through the tears about taking advantage of him. Lindsay was a teenager when Papa died. At the height of that weird mixture of thinking you know everything and caring too much about how others perceive you. Papa was many things, but he was never cool. He wore the same old t-shirt every day with a front pocket just big enough to fit a pack of cigarettes. He always smelled of mildew because he washed his clothes but then let them dry naturally, meaning packed together in a washing machine. Oh my gosh. A lifetime of smoking had blessed him with an unlimited supply of film. He had no problem sharing that phlegm with everyone, no matter the time or occasion. He listened to Johnny Cash on perpetual repeat and drove an old El Camino, a car truck, everywhere he went. In other words, Papa wasn't ideal company for a beautiful 17-year-old girl with an active social life. Thus, she took advantage of him in the same way that every young girl takes advantage of a father. She loved and admired him. She asked him for things that he sometimes gave her, and she didn't pay him a lot of attention when she was around her friends. To this day, being able to take advantage of someone is the measure in my mind of having a parent. For me and Lindsay, the fear of imposing stalked our minds, infecting even the food we ate. We recognized instinctively that many of the people we depended on weren't supposed to play that role in our lives. So much so that it was one of the first things Lindsay thought of when she learned of Papa's death. We were conditioned to feel that we couldn't really depend on people, that even as children, asking someone for a meal or for help with a broken down automobile was a luxury, that we shouldn't indulge in too much, lest we fully tap the reservoir of goodwill serving as a safety valve in our lives. Mama and Papa did everything they could to fight that instinct. On our rare trips to a nice restaurant, they would interrogate me about what I truly wanted until I'd confessed that yes, I did want the steak. And then they'd order it for me over my protest. No matter how imposing, no figure could erase that feeling entirely. Papa had come the closest, but he clearly hadn't succeeded all the way, and now he was gone. Papa died on a Tuesday, and I know this because when Mom's boyfriend Matt drove me to a local diner the next morning to pick up food for the whole family, Leonard Skinner's song, Tuesday Gone, was playing on the radio. But somehow I've got to carry on. Tuesday is gone with the wind. That was the moment it really hit me that Papa was never coming back. The adults did what people do when a loved one dies. They planned a funeral, figured out how to pay for it, and hoped that they did the deceased some justice. We hosted a visitation in Middleton that Thursday so all the locals could pay their respects, then had a second visitation in Jackson on Friday before a Saturday funeral. Even in death, Papa had one foot in Ohio and another in the holler. Whew.